Hello my dears, welcome back to Whispers of Turkish Stars, where the whispers turn into stories you can feel in your chest. Today I'm vibrating with excitement because we're diving into the bond that so many of you can't stop asking about, the connection that has taken over your comments and our DMs, the one you say feels unbreakable even when the cameras stop rolling. You saw the title and you already know what we're here for. We're talking about Akın Akinozu and Ebru Şahin, two names that spark 1,000 memories the instant they're spoken together. Two talents who stepped into a storm of fiction and, somehow, made it feel like a calm you could live in forever. Before we wade into the tide of emotions, remember you're at Whispers of Turkish Stars. If you love these deep dives into the heartbeats behind the headlines, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that keeps your pulse racing. Because this isn't just another recap. This is about what happens when a pairing on screen becomes a rhythm people around the world start to breathe with. There are couples who trend and fade, who flash like lightning and disappear. But there are also those rare unions whose light refuses to dim, even when the night closes in. With Akın and Ebru, that light has stayed. Their alchemy began under the ancient skies of Mardin, where history clings to stone and every sunrise looks like a promise. On the set where Miran and Reyyan were born for the world, something else took shape: an ease of movement, a dialogue that sounded less like lines and more like confession, a way of looking at each other that felt like home after a long journey. From the tension that shook their first encounters to the tenderness that grew between them, audiences didn't just watch, they leaned closer, certain that they were catching real sparks at the edges of fiction. It wasn't only the sweeping romance of Miran's gravity and Reyyan's fierce softness, it was the trust behind it. He could be thunder, and she could be a lighthouse, and somehow the storm always knew where the shore was. Scene after scene, you could see the precision of two artists who understood not just their characters, but each other's rhythm. It felt like a dance they had been practicing all their lives without knowing it, and when the music finally played, they simply moved. As the series conquered hearts beyond borders, fans turned their attention to the spaces between takes, those stolen seconds when the world forgets to perform. A shared laugh when the slate clapped wrong. A shoulder offered after a long day. Interviews where their praise for one another sounded less like courtesy and more like instinct. Social media began to hum with clues. A caption that read like a secret, a photo frame just wide enough to show two smiles meeting in the middle, a like that landed exactly where curiosity had been living all alone. Paparazzi lenses caught what fans had already begun to sense, not just co-stars, but companions, the kind who read each other's weather and know when to carry an umbrella. A glance at a premiere that lingered half a second too long. A shared breath in a backstage corridor where the noise couldn't touch them. And then, that moment, the one so many of you whispered about, when they chose to let the world see them not as a headline, but as two people standing closer than rumor allows. No scripted confession, no press release. Just glimpses that felt like a door quietly opening. The response? Not shock, but a rush of joy, as if everyone had been waiting for the sky to say out loud what the stars had already drawn. What made it irresistible wasn't only their beauty or their fame. It was the way they balanced each other without losing themselves. Akın brings intensity like a vow, focused, disciplined, the kind of presence that fills a frame and still leaves room for tenderness. Ebru meets that force with luminous grace, a quiet that listens and a courage that answers back. Together, they feel like an equation that solves itself, separate identities, powerful in their own right, multiplied into something the world doesn't see every day. The origin of their connection was work, yes, but work can be sacred when it's done with that kind of devotion. Long days under the Midyat sun became canvases for a partnership that pushed each of them higher. Every retake a promise, every scene a small miracle stitched together by trust. When Miran's shadows grew heavy, Reyyan's light knew where to shine. When Reyyan's heart needed shelter, Miran's ferocity turned into a shield. And in their pauses, those breath-held moments before a line. There was a language beyond words, a pulse the microphones couldn't catch but every viewer could feel. As the show's wave rose and rose, their real-life tide followed. Fans mapped timelines from airport sightings to award show stages, reading meaning into the choreography of proximity. A quiet dinner in the city that ended with a drive under streetlights. A quick hug that looked like it belonged to people who no longer needed permission to be gentle. An inside joke that survived the edit room and reappeared months later, alive on a story that disappeared in 24 hours but stayed in memory far longer. And then came the season where they didn't hide that they were each other's safe place. Not a spectacle, just calm certainty. A handwritten note tucked into a bouquet. A birthday message that sounded like a thank you for courage. Red carpet nights where they seemed to carry the same breath, moving through flashbulbs as if the world had slowed to let them pass. The fans didn't just celebrate a pairing, they celebrated what it represented, a love that honors individuality, that says you can be entirely yourself and still belong completely to the moment you're sharing. Navigating the public gaze is a high-wire act, but they learned to step where the wire felt strongest. They offered glimpses, not a diary. They gave us warmth without trading away their sanctuary. Posts that looked like windows but were actually gardens, cultivated, cherished, carefully open to the sun. A mountain getaway shot at golden hour. A coffee cup in frame and a second cup just out of sight, the implication sweeter than any caption. They drew a boundary that felt like wisdom, enough for the fans to keep believing, enough for their hearts to keep breathing in peace. What sets them apart, too, is the way they champion each other's climbs. When Ebru took on a role that demanded fire and poise, Akın's pride came through like dawn, quiet and unstoppable. When Akın trained for a performance that required grit and transformation, Ebru's encouragement stood beside him like a lighthouse on a cliff. They applauded each other loudly and supported each other softly. In an industry that can sometimes turn love into a scoreboard, they chose to be teammates, not competitors. That alone felt like an act of defiance, the kind that makes a bond last. The authenticity is what keeps the world listening. In an era where so many romances are packaged and sold, theirs feels like a conversation that keeps unfolding. A look across a crowded room that says, "I see you." A shared smile that asks, "Are you okay?" And answers, "I'm right here." It's not performative, and that's why it performs miracles. It makes people believe that under all the layers of fame and pressure, there's still a place where two people can meet and say, "Let's build something worth protecting." Beyond the love story, they become examples of how quiet strength changes rooms. Grounded in work, generous in spirit, they don't cling to the spotlight, they let it pass over them and keep going. They bring a steadiness to interviews that feels like a promise to stay human, no matter how loud the applause gets. For fans who are tired of the noise, they become a place to rest your eyes, proof that tenderness isn't weakness, and discipline can be graceful. There have been moments that tested them, there always are. Rumors that swirled faster than truth could walk. Schedules that stretched thin. The distance that sometimes comes with ambition. But every time, we watched a familiar pattern, a pause, a recalibration, a return to center. Protective silence when the world got invasive. Kind laughter when the chatter tried to define them. Not drama for drama's sake, but a refusal to let outside hands write their script. In those choices, their connection looked less like a spark and more like a flame that knows how to survive the wind. So when we say inseparable, we're not painting a fairy tale with no shadows. We're honoring the craft of staying. The friendship that holds everything else together. The mutual respect that says, "Your dreams aren't in my way, they're part of our horizon." They've found a rhythm that keeps giving. On screen is myth, off screen is something gentler and no less powerful. It's no wonder that fans around the planet have folded their names into wishes, the kind you whisper before you blow out candles. What they've built reaches beyond cameras and scripts. It's in the way their lives seem to meet naturally, like rivers that were always meant to become one sea. The choices to show up for each other's milestones. The patience to let the world think what it wants and still hold on to what's true. The grace to accept that love can be both public and private, a celebration and a secret, and that both parts deserve to be honored. That is where their strength lives, in the balance. If we trace the arc of this story, it reads like a symphony. Movement 1. Discovery, those first notes in Martin where the echoes held their breath. Movement 2, Ascent, the chemistry blazing into a phenomenon that turned weekly episodes into rituals. Movement 3, Revelation, the soft unveiling of closeness that felt inevitable because it was honest. Movement 4, Endurance, a partnership that keeps choosing presence, keeps choosing care, keeps choosing the quiet yes that lasts longer than the loud maybe. And yes, let's say it clearly. This isn't about perfection, it's about devotion. It's about two artists who treat love with the same reverence they give their craft, showing up, listening, refining, protecting, celebrating. Not every day needs to be a headline, and that might be the secret. The story unfolds even when no one's watching. Perhaps that's why, whenever they appear together, it feels like a continuation rather than a reintroduction. The narrative never breaks, it breathes. So here we are, circling back to the beginning with more understanding than when we started. Akın Akinozu and Ebru didn't just play a couple that survived impossible odds, they modeled a way of being that makes the impossible look simple. He with the steadiness of a promise, she with the courage of a sunrise. Together, they remind us that love isn't fireworks every night, it's a candle carried carefully, so the light never has to go out. To wrap our hearts around this journey, let's remember what we've witnessed: the undeniable chemistry born on set, the warmth that seeped off screen and asked to be seen, the way they mastered the line between public affection and private sanctuary, the proud applause they give each other's victories, and the rare authenticity that keeps the world leaning in. This is why the phrase "inseparable forever" doesn't feel like a wish. It sounds like a reading of the room, a truth we've all sensed in the space between their words. Now it's your turn to speak, my loves. Tell me what moment still lives rent-free in your mind. Was it a look, a laugh, a line that made you clutch your chest and whisper, "This is real"? Do you carry a favorite memory of them that no rumor can touch? Drop your thoughts below and let this community do what it does best: hold space for a story that keeps giving. If this deep dive made your heart beat a little louder, show it some love with a like, share it with someone who needs to believe in something steady, and make sure you're subscribed to Whispers of Turkish Stars so you never miss the next chapter in the saga of hearts that find each other and stay. Until we meet again, take care of your tenderness, and keep listening to the whispers that tell you where the real stories are.